All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Riley, Educational Technology Specialist at Marywood University. This is our final Brightspace Trailblazers session, and oddly, I'm alone. So I'm just going to talk through all the stuff we're going to talk about today, just in case I touch on things that Kat didn't touch on Monday, but she did a great job, so I'm sure we'll talk about the exact same things. But in the meantime, if people show up, maybe they'll have questions. But for right now, it's just you and me, viewer and presenter. So before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who came throughout the last 6 weeks and really made these trainings special and informative for even us, the presenters, because even though we've had Brightspace for several months now, we're still learning. So it's awesome to learn things every week because of the questions people ask, and just know that all those questions you asked are helping future Brightspace learners here at Marywood University because these videos are living in a sense. So anything you've asked, anything you've added to the conversation has been helpful, and we thank you for that. So without further ado, our last Brightspace Trailblazers session is about course management and some tools to help you with that. So we're going to go over quick eval. We're going to go over rubrics, intelligent agents, and attendance and class progress. It sounds like a lot, but really it's just easier ways to do things that you were already doing in Moodle. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and show you my email. All right, so I'm already here on Brightspace, and we're going to start by going to, well, before we go there, a quick eval is actually right here on the navbar, right from the organizational homepage. Right when you log in, it's right here. So quick eval is essentially your hub for grading, and it shows all of the items that are in gradebooks across all of your classes that need to be graded, which sounds daunting, but it's actually quite nice. I can say that because I don't teach any courses. So even here on my own account, I do have a test course, and my demo student did put something in my discussion, and that is part of the grade items that I have for that course. So you can see here that we have like submissions, we can view by activities. So we can have like all of the discussions just listed from my test course. If I had multiple courses, I could filter by course and by activity name, and I could also search for different things. So this might be a little more effective if I go into a course and impersonate Kat so that you can see exactly what is happening here. So I'm going to go into the class list. It sounds so sinister to impersonate someone, but it's pretty much just seeing the world through their eyes, the Brightspace world at least. So, all right, so I'm Kat right now, I'm impersonating. And if I go to tools, this is another place I can find quick eval. I can go right here to tools in my course and then click on quick eval. And right here, it'll bring us to that same page, except this one is catered to this specific course. So you could actually look by discussion and activity because we are in a specific course. But if you were to access quick eval from the homepage, the organizational homepage that you get to by clicking on Marywood, you would see grade items that need to be graded for all of your courses. So if you'd rather break it down by course initially, just go into the course you wish to grade things in and then click on tools and then quick eval, and here you are. So just like I mentioned before, we can view it by activities, which is what Kat has done here, or we could view it by submissions. So the activities gives us an overview of the different activities, as the name implies. And for example, that would include how many have completed it, how many have been evaluated, and how many have been published. So the completed ring is how many students have completed the actual activity. Evaluated ring is how many you as the instructor have evaluated so far, and the published is how many of those grades that you've evaluated have you published to the student. So from here, we're kind of just looking at an overview and figuring everything out. I see we do have someone joining us today. I see Pat, you're joining, so I'll let you join, but it's just you and me today. Hey Pat, how's it going? So here we have, like I said, the completed, evaluated, and published grades for this discussion 5. And you notice as I keep hovering over it, those tools change to something I can actually click on. We can evaluate all of our submissions for discussion 5. We can look at the submission list in general. And if we click on more actions, we can publish all the grades, or we can dismiss it until another point in time. So if we're not ready to look at these discussion 5 submissions just yet, we can dismiss them until a later date when we feel more comfortable with grading them. Maybe we want more, like a better completion rate. Maybe we want to wait for everyone to reply instead of just 17 out of 21. But if you were to evaluate, you can click on Evaluate All, and it opens the Assess Topic area, which if you remember from a couple weeks ago when we talked about the discussion tool, we talked about grading those discussions and clicking Assess Topic from within the discussion tool. So this is just the same thing, but in a more centralized location. You can see here that Kat had a rubric, so you can click on any of the elements of the rubric. So if I wanted to give student needs improvement, I can just click on that like she has already, or I can click on any of the others. You can also see at the top here, we have a topic score that you can type here. It kind of gives you the override ability to not use the rubric score if you don't want to. And then of course you can add general feedback, which Kat gave from Mondays, just a bunch of gibberish, but you could type your own information here. You also have access to all the HTML editor tools, so you can add a video if you want, like responding to their discussion, or you can add a quick link to something else if you want to. It's the same HTML editor you see everywhere else in Brightspace. And then if you keep scrolling, you actually see the post in question. So because we're looking at discussion 5 and evaluating those, we can see the student's response to discussion 5 and all of the details he added in here. So if you look at the top, we have initial threads. I believe this was his initial attempt at discussion 5, because I think the way Kat set it up was they have to post once and then respond to 2 others. This is his initial thread. He probably named it that. So we can see his initial response, and then he has 2 responses to other students, and we can see those as well. So we can see all of his submissions for this discussion 5 right here, and we can grade it from here and also click on the rubric. Now, this is one student, and if you wanted to keep going, because we did click Evaluate All, you can click on these arrows at the top right and kind of navigate between the students. So if I go on to user 2, we have this other student who we can also click on different elements of the rubric for, add some feedback, and look at her submissions. It looks like she only did part 1 of this, where she just posted her first response instead of responding to others. So maybe that would affect the score. But the point is to look at all of their submissions for this particular activity. So it should all be here, everything they've posted. So you can see right here, she has 1 thread, 0 replies. Whereas user number 1, our first student, has 1 thread and 2 replies. So he actually fulfills the requirements. It's kind of a quick eval look at grading discussions. There's also, of course, you can grade assignments and you can grade quizzes and things like that. That's also available here in Quick Eval. You just have to look at the little icons. So we have discussion, discussion, and assignment. So if I clicked on Evaluate All for the assignment, it would show me assignments right here. This one was a text submission. So you can see right here from Grant, it says I have completed the practicum. So it was a text submission. There are no files to download. And then you can see on the side, we have our different assignment details, like when it was due, the assignment information, so the description and everything like that. You can preview the student view of this assignment if you wish. And then if you keep scrolling down, if you had a rubric, it would show up here. You can also associate a rubric to your assignments after the fact or create one right here. You can do your score scheme. So this was a pass fail because it was a, did you complete it or not? At least that's what I'm gathering from this assignment. It's not mine, it's Kat's, so she could speak better to that. But you can also provide feedback here, record audio and video to respond to the student, and then you just update it. And same as what you did with the discussion assessment, you can click on the arrows to go to the next student. And you can see that they completed the practicum as well. You can see everything else just like we did with the previous student. So the assignments are a little bit different. They do show you your documents if you did have them submit any files. And I think Kat did have them submit files for a different one, so I will try to show you that. So yeah, here we have one where you can actually see a file. It'll show you what the file type is, and you can click on it to actually open it up. So when you click on it, it opens up within Brightspace, and it opens up as a PDF preview, even though this is an Excel file ending. This will show up as a PDF preview. And that's pretty nice because the PDF previews include annotation tools. So you can actually zoom in and out, of course. You can use this marker to draw or write some text on the document itself. You can make comments with this little note feature right here onto the document. And you can add like text and point to things. So you pretty much just mark up the assignment as your feedback. And I'm pretty sure Moodle has something very similar. So if you've used the streamlined grading tool over in Moodle, it's pretty much the same exact concept, except the icons are a little bit different. And of course, you can always just download it to your computer if you rather use like track changes or use your own computer instead of using the annotation tools in Brightspace. That's totally up to you. But by default, it does open as a PDF preview and you can annotate it. So it's kind of just whatever you're comfortable with, but these tools are available for you. Are there any questions about that so far?
Where is this?
This is in the quick eval tool. I think you came in a little late, Pat.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry. You know what? I'll just watch it later. You know,
that's okay. It's really easy to find. I'll show you super quick. This is the quick eval tool. So it's kind of like your hub, your hotspot for grading. You can find it in two places. It's here in your course. So if you're clicked into a course, you look at the green bar and you click on tools, and it's right here.
okay.
Quick eval. It opens up all grade items for that specific course and what needs to be graded. So it shows you like how many completed it, how many you evaluated so far, and how many grades were published out to students.
Okay.
So like this Excel Practicum 1, almost everyone has a published grade, and Practicum 2, no one has a published grade yet. So it kind of shows you different aspects of your grading progress. And the other place to access it is here on the homepage when you first log in. It's right here at the top in the green bar, and this will show you your grade items for every course. So if you're teaching multiple courses, it'll show all courses. So because I'm still Kat impersonating as her, I can see from the OPI, we have some things to look at. We have stats, and it breaks it up into the different courses. You can also use the filter button to filter between different activities. So if you feel like grading discussions right now, you can click on discussions. You can also filter it by course. So if you just want to see one of these two courses, you can click on one. It'll only show that course. So you're not too overwhelmed.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So I went through kind of looking at the evaluation setup for discussions and assignments through quick eval, but you can actually also grade those two activity types through their respective tools. So you can go into your course and click on assignments, for example, and then you can look at all of your assignments listed, click the context menu, which is that little down caret, and then say view submissions. And that brings you to a page where you can go through and grade everything for that specific assignment. So it's a little bit differently set up, but it's also an option. And for discussions, you can click on the discussions tool and click on the context menu for a topic and then say, it should say assess topic, maybe not that one because it's questions, and maybe not that one because it's introductions. Discussion 1, assess topic. So if it includes assessment on it, that means you can actually assess it. For discussion 1, it does include assessment because Kat set it up to be that way. And if you click the context menu, you can see assess topic, and then it opens up the area where you can start assessing the different student submissions for that discussion topic. So you can still do it through the individual tools, but quick eval is just kind of the easiest way to go right in and start grading without having to fool around with these different tools. So that's pretty much everything on quick eval. And it's really just super nice and super easy. That's all I can explain it. Something else that Kat went through was the rubrics tool, which is the main hub for all of your rubrics for a course. So you can access that through tools and course admin. And if you remember from previous weeks, course admin is the area where you can access every single tool that an instructor has in their arsenal. So most of them do show up in this tools menu here, like most of the ones that people use all the time. But for ones like rubrics, where maybe you don't want to manage them all the time, you just want to create them on the fly, it lives here in course administration. So it's easier. It doesn't clog up the navbar. It's just right here in the listing. So if I click on rubrics at the bottom, I can see a list of all rubrics that have been created, and I can look at them, I can edit them, I can create new ones. This is pretty much just where you can manage your rubrics. So you can see these little icons next to each name. The little link means that this particular rubric has associations and cannot be deleted. So it's linked to something, so we can't delete it. The lock means that it is it's part of an assessment already and can't be edited or deleted. So I'm not completely sure of the difference between the two, but I'm pretty sure that this lock means that there are active things, like active discussions that this rubric is a part of and that you've already graded with it. So you can't delete it because that would just throw off the whole grading system. Whereas I don't think these rubrics have been linked, or sorry, they have been linked, but they haven't been used yet. So like this final project part 1, I don't think the final project has begun, but it is created. So the rubric is linked, so you can't delete it. Either way, no matter what they mean, the link and the lock mean that you cannot delete these rubrics because they are in use in some way. Whereas this untitled one that Kat created on Monday, you can do whatever you want to it because we didn't assign it to any sort of activity. So if you click on the context menu of any of your rubrics, you can still edit them even if they are linked. But if you go here and click on edit, it opens up the rubric, just like you would have seen it when you were creating it. So you have your name at the top, you have your criterion areas, and then the levels across the top. And just like you're probably used to seeing in other rubric tools like for Bongo and for Moodle and things like that, you have plus buttons to create columns, and you also have the opportunity to add more criterion. So if you wanted to click on that, it just adds a new row. And of course, you have your trash cans on the side, so you could delete extra ones you don't want. But this one's a little more laid out than the Bongo ones. You have your plus signs, so you can add more levels. You have your points, so you can add the points designated to each level. You can also reverse the level order. So if you'd rather it go 1, 2, 3 instead of 3, 2, 1, you can just click on this. You can choose a type, which is holistic or analytic. I'm sure Kat would know a little bit more about that. And then the scoring, you can do no score, points, or custom points. But the default is points and analytic, I believe. So you can change the text of any of these. So if you wanted to change the name of the criterion, you can. You can provide more detail as to what a level 3 for criterion 1 would be, like what constitutes getting a level 3. And then the initial feedback, like, congratulations, you got a level 3, like, great job, or this needs improvement, or this did not hit the mark. You can add as many or as little detail as you want. And then at the bottom, there's this thing called overall score. And this pretty much means based on how many points you got up here in your
My apologies.
Oh.
Couldn't hear what you said.
Siri activated criterion. If you, however many points you've gotten across your entire rubric, it puts you into a certain level. So it kind of just gives you an idea of where you're at. So if I got 8 or more points up here in this rubric, then I would get a level 4. if I got 6 to 7, I would get a level 3, and so on. So it kind of just gives you like an average idea of how many points you got. Of course, as a student, you could see how many points you acquired from your rubric after assessment, but this kind of just gives you a level to call yourself. So maybe this level 4 could be called master. So you mastered this activity. Or level 1 could be needs improvement. So you fell into that level. But it's kind of just like an overall categorization of the different points. And then if you keep scrolling down to options, you see the visibility toggle. So you can say whether the rubric is visible or hidden to students. You can say the rubric is hidden until feedback is published. So then when they get their grade, they see what they were graded on. But when it's visible, they can actually see it in the assignment, so they can actually know what they're being graded on. You can choose to hide the scores from the students, and then you can add a description for your own personal reference. So this is just for you. The students will not see this. It's kind of an idea of, oh, what is this rubric actually for? You can write it down here. And then I believe all we said about this on Monday, advanced availability, is just keep these two options open because eventually we will be working with competencies and ePortfolio, so might as well just keep them checked. But for right now, I don't have much more detail on those. Just uncheck them. That's all I've got. I think another thing I did want to mention about these text boxes up here in the rubric is that, especially right here in this description area of each criterion level, there is this insert stuff button. So you can actually use the insert stuff button to add a video note or link to a video, like on YouTube, or you can enter a link to an article that they should have been referencing or things like that. I believe in one of her rubrics, Kat actually used this to put in like an article that, you know, they should have been referencing, something like that. So you can actually link to things in these descriptions so that if you do have this rubric visible to students, they can use those links or watch that video to help them better understand what they're supposed to be doing as per the rubric. Are there any questions about that so far?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. All right, so I think that's pretty much it for rubrics, because we have kind of talked about them in the past a little bit. So, I mean, if you've worked with rubrics before, it's pretty much just the same, but in a different place. So I guess the next thing we'll talk about is a little more, at least in my opinion, high concept, because I'm still a little shaky on it, but it's called intelligent agents. And this is found in your tools bar in the nav bar of your course. So you click on tools and you click on intelligent agents and it brings you to this page. So essentially what an intelligent agent is, it's kind of like an automatic email system based on a set of criteria. So you can see here that Kat has one called checking in, and this one, as per the description, sends out an email if there are a few days without the student accessing the course. So I'm going to click on this context menu and edit it to show you what I mean by that. Essentially, what this agent does is it sends out an email to anyone in the class list who, as per the course activity, has not accessed the course in 3 days. So it's kind of sending an email. I'm going to skip past all this for right now, but it's going to send an email to students who haven't accessed the course in 3 days, just making sure that they're all right. It says that Kat has noticed they haven't accessed the course since whatever date it was. And while you're able to do your work on your own time and you aren't required to log in, we just want to make sure that everything's okay. So things like that. This is a good instance of a good use of an intelligent agent because it sends out a message after a certain amount of inactivity. I would say this is probably super useful at the beginning of the semester when you're still figuring out what students are going to stay in the course and which ones are going to drop it. So it kind of keeps not a tab on your students, but it kind of initiates a conversation between you and the student from Brightspace without you really having to do any in-depth, data searching for if students have accessed your course. Brightspace does it for you, and then it sends out the email based on, what kind of criteria you set. And of course, you write out the message yourself, so you still have a personal aspect to it. Other ones that she has created are ones for discussions. And I believe that these discussion ones are maybe to indicate that a student hasn't replied to a discussion yet, and they should have by now. Let's see. This one is still active for all users visible in the class list, and it pertains to a student who has not added any threads to discussion 4. So it's kind of a little more intense. I am not the best at explaining these, but this one has a little more information, and it seems like it's using release conditions. I'll go over this a little better when we create a new one in a few seconds, but I just wanted to show you 2 different types of intelligent agents before we get started. So the first one would be just a simple one for course activity, and the second one is one that incorporates release conditions. So you set up the condition yourself, which is this person has not added any threads to a discussion topic, and then the agent is based off of that. But let's create one and see what it actually, looks like. I'm going to create it in my test course so I don't accidentally send out some emails to Kat's actual students, because that would be a little disastrous. I'm going to go back to my own course. And I'm going to go to my tools area here, click on intelligent agents, and get started. So I don't have any intelligent agents set up, so you just go over to new to start a new one. It asks for a name, so I'll just do a checking in one as well. And you can add a description for yourself. I don't believe the students see this at all because I don't think they are really aware that these agents exist. But this description for me is for students who haven't accessed the course in several days for use for attendance verification. That doesn't need to be really specified, but for my purposes, maybe that's what I want to do. And then it says for status that the agent is enabled, which is good. It means that it'll actually work. And then under our first section for criteria, our first thing to decide is the role in class list. So this pretty much means, are we talking about everyone in the class list, which includes myself as the instructor, or are we just talking about users with specific roles? And if we were to click on that, we can choose just students. If we just want this to apply to students, then we can click users with specific roles and say student. Or if you have, facilitators, you can say, oh, if the facilitator hasn't logged in a couple days, that's also an issue, something like that. So if you just want it to pertain to students, you can click on this users with specific roles and then click on student. So it's only going to apply to students who fulfill this criteria. Under login activity, this is where we choose whether we want to talk about login activity or course activity or neither, as we saw with the release conditions in the previous agent. But I'm talking about course activity in this one specifically. So I'm going to check the box for take action when the following course activity is satisfied. So we can choose whether we want the email to send when a user has not accessed the course in the last 3 days, which is what I'm going to do. Or we can say if they have accessed the course during the last 3 days, maybe it would be like some sort of thank you message or something else. But usually you want to email students when they're not accessing a course. I'm going to keep that on the first radio button. Now, like I mentioned before with release conditions, if you were going to base an agent off release conditions, you can always look at your existing ones. I don't have any existing ones, but if you did create release conditions for an activity such as an assignment or a discussion, you can use those release conditions here as well. You can also create one right from here, and this release condition will be available for other places where release conditions are accepted, which is pretty much everywhere in Brightspace. It allows you to select a condition type. So if there was no submission to a certain assignment, we can select what assignment that actually is. If there was no submission to free write exercise that I have, and we added that as a release condition, then students who didn't submit to that assignment after a certain amount of days or whatever it ended up being, they would get an email prompting them to maybe submit or something. I can set up that email myself, but that's an example of a release condition and how to use it. But essentially you just select what kind of condition type we're talking about, like what issue is present, And then depending on your condition type, it allows you to select the details of that condition. So if you're talking about an assignment, you can then select what assignment we're talking about. But I'm not going to go through with the release conditions, just know that they're there. I'm going to stick with my course activity and then look under actions. So the first step here in actions is repetition. So we can choose to take action only the first time that the criteria is satisfied for a user or every time. So in this case, I would probably say the first time. If a student hasn't accessed the course in the last 3 days for the first time, that is when I'll send an email. Maybe I don't want to do it every time they skip 3 days. That might just be a little bit of an overkill. So I'm going to keep it at the first time. I'm going to skip past user enrollments. We don't really need to worry about that. And then, of course, you can choose to send an email when the criteria is satisfied. So if a student has not accessed the course in 3 days, we're sending them an email. So our defaults here, the name of the email that it comes from is Brightspace at Marywood. So that's kind of the default. And the reply to address for responses, it'll come here to D2L support at brightmail.marywood.edu. You can change these defaults in your settings. It just says that you can do that. I haven't really played around with it too much, but just know that that's an option. You can change the default settings on the settings page for your account. And then we can go down to our to area. Now this is where things get a little interesting because you don't want to specify a student right here because you don't want a certain student to get emails every time someone doesn't access the course for 3 days. So you kind of want to indicate that it should go to whoever is initiating this criteria. So whoever hasn't accessed the course, we want the email to go to them instead of, you know, a specific person who maybe isn't part of this criteria. So to make more sense of this, we can click on what special email addresses can I use? And when we do that, this little window comes up that says you can use replace strings. And essentially what that means is it's a stand-in for a user in your course. So the first one, if we type in the curly bracket initiating user, curly bracket again, it indicates the user who performs the actions necessary to satisfy the criteria for the agent. So this would be a user who didn't access the course in 3 days. This would indicate that an email would send to whoever initiated the criteria, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to highlight that just by clicking my cursor over it, Control C, and then I'm going to go into my to field and Control V to paste it. Now it's going to be to the initiating user, and it automatically collects their email from their account on Brightspace, so it just sends to them like it should. You can also blind copy yourself so you know who it's sending to. So I'm going to put my name in here, or my address rather. I'll get a blind copy of any of these emails so I know exactly who isn't accessing the course. And then we can add in our subject, whatever we want the subject to be. Notice that they also say you can use replace strings in the subject line and the message. So if you wanted to use like the initiating user's first name, you can say something, I'll copy this first. You can say something like, hey, comma, and then put in that replace string so that it'll put their name in there. And then I'll put like just checking in. So it'll say like, say someone named Adam didn't access my course in 3 days. It'll say, hey, Adam, just checking in. So it adds a little bit of personal flair to it. So it doesn't sound so robotic and automated. And then in the message, we can use similar replace strings. If you're interested in using more, you can click on that little message again and look at all the different kinds of replace strings. So we have, you can use the name of the organization if you want, which would be Marywood U. You can have the first name, last name, username of the initiating user, and then the last course access date, which is pretty relevant to our current agent setup. And that would be like the last date they access the course. So maybe I do want to do that. I'll copy this one, and maybe in our message I'll say, hey, and then put in the initiating user first name, replace string again. I noticed that you haven't accessed the course since, and then put in that replace string so that the date fills in. So it kind of pulls the information from Brightspace's database of sorts so that you don't have to actually know the dates, but based on this agent and the criteria we've set up with it, this is pretty relevant information. So it'll end up saying like, hey, Adam, I noticed that you haven't accessed the course since September 23rd. Just wanted to make sure everything is okay and you're still enjoying the course. Maybe you wouldn't say those exact words, but you kind of get the gist. You provide the email message that'll send out when the agent initiates. And then you can, of course, add attachments or record a video or audio to attach to this email. And then under scheduling is where we have our last important step for this agent. If you don't use scheduling, as it is not the default, you will have to manually run this agent by going to the Intelligent Agents page and clicking Run Now. So that would require more work on your end, whereas if you use the schedule, you can schedule when it runs and then you don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to click Use Schedule and update the schedule. So I'm going to say, when does the system check for someone who hasn't logged in 3 days? So I can have that check daily, or maybe weekly is a little better. Every week it'll check who hasn't accessed the course in 3 days and then send out that email to the students who haven't accessed. And how many, are we doing this every week or is it bi-weekly? You know, something like that. So I'm going to repeat it every 1 week and I'm going to repeat it on Sunday. It's arbitrary, but I'm going to start it on Sunday. And I'm going to have the start date be, you know, if I was doing this for the beginning of the semester, it would probably be like August 24th. And then my end date would probably be like early October. So October 5th. So then when I click update, it'll tell me here under scheduling that it's going to be evaluated every 1 week on Sunday, starting Monday, August 24th, which, you know, maybe I should have made it Mondays until Monday, October 5th. Every week until October 5th, it's going to evaluate how many students haven't accessed the course in 3 days and then send them the email that I set up here, and their names will be filled in, and then the last course access date. So it's a lot of information, but it's a pretty useful tool, especially if you plan on keeping up with your students with this kind of tool and kind of keeping a tab on them. But if you don't really want to use automated emails and you would like to just do it more personally or not at all, that's totally up to you. But we can save and close this, and we have our new agent, and it's here in the list. We can see the last run date and next run date, but because my start and end date both started and ended before today's date, we don't have any run dates. I can always go here to the context menu and run it now. So I can run this right now and evaluate who hasn't been, you know, in the course in 3 days. We can do a practice run of it if we aren't sure we actually want to use it yet. We can view the history. So if you didn't BCC yourself on the emails, you can always view the history of the intelligent agent and see who it's sent out to. And then of course you can edit it, copy it, and delete it. So there are some pretty cool things you could do with these intelligent agents. It's really up to your preferences, whether you want to use it at all, but just know that it's something you can use if you're interested. Are there any questions about that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, there's a lot of talking.
Uh,
That was a big one. All right, I think we have 2 more things to get through. They're pretty quick, at least I think so. So we're going to talk about attendance and class progress. So just like in Moodle, I don't know if you've been using it this semester or not, but there is an attendance tool that you can utilize. And I am actually going to go into Kat's course again because I only have one student. And then I'm going to go through and impersonate her again. Go down here. Okay. So just like your rubrics tool from before, the attendance tool can be found in course admin. And it should be right here, attendance. And the attendance tool opens and it mentions registers. So essentially registers are like groups of things that you want to take attendance for. So that could be like your in-person attendance, if we're talking about the hybrid system, virtual attendance, so you can kind of, keep your group separate if that's how you want to do it. So this is a great example of why you would want two different registers. But if this was like a normal semester, maybe you just want the one and it's like, oh, class attendance. And then you can just adjust your attendance scheme and take attendance from there. But essentially what a register is these buckets of groups for taking attendance. In our in-person attendance, if I click on the context menu, I can edit the register or view the data. So I'm going to edit the register just to see what it would look like if we created an attendance register. We have the opportunity to name it, of course. We can add a description for ourselves. The students won't see it. And then we have an attendance scheme here. So at one point we did create a COVID one, and I think this one was more of an overarching. So it had present, in person, present online, absent, excused, things like that. I think that's the one we currently have in Moodle right now, so it's very similar to that one. And then the system scheme, I think, is just present and absent. So it's a dichotomy. So the system scheme is just pretty simple. You can adjust your cause for concern. So if we don't reach 80% attendance, maybe we're concerned about that. Allow users to view this attendance register, so we can leave it so that the students can see it if we want them to. If we don't, we can uncheck it. We can include all the users in the course, or we could just include the users in specific groups. So as we'll see in the virtual group, we actually did create a group for that. So that would be an instance where maybe you just have a specific group of students who are doing virtual only, which is the case for a bunch of classes. So we want to create a group within Brightspace to house those virtual students. And then you would create an attendance register to take attendance for just those students. So you would include those users in the virtual group. I'll go over that in a couple seconds while we look at the other one, but this one, maybe we'll just include all users. Maybe we're assuming that all of them will be in-person attendees until proven otherwise. Completely, up to you, and you could change this at any time. But then under sessions, we actually describe what we're taking attendance for. So this is where you would add your class meetings. So if we're talking in-person attendance and we're talking about the year of 2020 with our hybrid scheme and everything like that, then maybe we're talking about once a week. So maybe these session names would indicate that, or we can say like in-person meeting 1 or something like that. Meeting 1, our session description is discussing nature and other lovely things. So you can like describe what the session actually was so that you and the students remember what happened and if you were there or not. You can order it around. So if you wanted it to be maybe meeting 3 instead of 1, you can do that. Or if you want to delete it altogether, that's an option too. For this one, we can say meeting 2, looking at different leaves. I'm not going to save this obviously because this is in Kat's class. It's still an example thing. She's not actually using it, but still. And then, we can adjust so on and so forth for however many sessions we have. If you need to add more than the standard 3, you can just click down here on this little text box and say, I want to add 2 more sessions, and then click add sessions. We'll save the page, even though I said I wouldn't save it. And it adds 2 more sessions for us to fill out. So we get all of those nice options. And then once you're done with your register, I'm going to say that's meeting 4, meeting 5. Once you're done with your register, you just click save, and you should be able to see it in your attendance tool. So let me go back and close this since we already saved it. Now we're back in the attendance tool and we can see all of our registers. Since I did hide this one for students, it has a little context. The other one does not because it's still visible to students. When it's time to take attendance, you just click view attendance data. And you should be able to see all of your sessions. And there's a little pencil icon next to each session date. So we can click the pencil icon to start taking attendance. So we can say for Grant, his attendance was present, Leslie was absent, so on and so forth. If we don't want to do each individual person because that's too time consuming, we can just click on this checkbox and say that everyone, let's see, maybe we can say that everyone is present so that it's easier. We can set the status and say that everyone is present because maybe everyone was except for maybe 2 people. So then we can just go through and mark the 2 people as absent instead of going through and clicking individually. So that's completely up to you how you want to do it, but that is how you take attendance. You just enter that attendance tool, you click on the context menu for your register, and then click View Attendance Data. And then you get that little pencil icon next to each session that you can click to take attendance for that session. You can also see at the end of this attendance data that it gives you the percentage of attendance for each student based on your meetings and what you've set for them. You can see the totals of how many present and how many absent that they have. So it's a very, very nifty tool. So I can also go back to the attendance register page one more time. And I'll show you what it looks like when you create an attendance register for a group. So for virtual attendance, I'm going to edit it real quick and show you. Under virtual attendance, we have the instance where we included all users in the following groups. And we created a group of students that we labeled virtual. So that we only have the students in that virtual group in our attendance register for virtual attendance. So if I click on View Attendance Data for this particular register, it's only going to show a selection of students, these 5, and then I can take attendance in the same manner. It's just with less students. So that's an example of maybe using a group for attendance, whereas the other one was the entire class. So completely up to you how you want to do it. But that's pretty much it for attendance. Do you have any questions about that, Pat?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I know we're running low on time, but I can totally finish class progress in 7 minutes. I think it'll take less. So this is probably one of Kat's favorite tools. It's right here in the nav bar, front and center. It's called Class Progress. And if you click on it, it shows you when it loads. It'll show you different elements of your class. You can see at the top here, for each column, it has a name. So we have content completed. So we'll see a percentage of the content completed and how many items out of the total amount of items are completed so far by each student. We have discussions, how many were read, how many threads created, and how many replies were written, how many logins to the system, and then their grades overall. So there are other options for these columns that I'll talk about in a second, but this is kind of an example of things you can look at for each student. It shows all of the users and it gives you all of these very nice numbers to look at for each column. And you can also use agents to automate feedback. So when you click on this, you go right to the Intelligent Agents tool and you can maybe send out emails based on the amount of threads read and how many things were replied to, something like that. But if you wanted to adjust what you're seeing on this class progress page, you can just click on Settings. And it brings you to this area where you select which indicators display in the class progress table. So right now, Kat has it set to content completion, discussions participation, login history, and grades performance. So if you click on these little context menus, you can replace any of them or you can move them up or down in the order. So if you'd rather see discussion participation first in that table, you can just click the context menu and move it up. If you want to replace one, you just click context and then replace, and it gives you the other options available. So we have assignments performance, so the current average of all submissions for that student. Checklist completion, so if you're using checklists, how far they are in their completion. Content visited, objectives completion, quiz performance, survey completion, system access. So you have a lot of options, but I think these four are pretty much the most popular: grades, performance, maybe not login history so much, but discussions, participation, and content completion are also pretty important, especially if you use discussions a lot in your course. You might want to replace that with assignments if you're more on the assignment side of things than discussions, but it's completely up to you, like most things in Brightspace. If you did go through and replace something or move it up or down, you can just save and close it, and it brings you right back to class progress, where you can see all of that data front and center with all of your students in your course. So I believe you can also filter by certain sections. So if you had like a cross-listed course, you can maybe just see the students registered for, the first course of that cross-listing. If you want to see it by groups, you can do it by groups, so on and so forth. So you can really filter it down to see as many or as little students as you like at a time. Are there any questions about that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty much it. I think the only thing we mentioned on Monday is that this navigation bar at the top of the courses has changed just a little bit. We took quizzes out of this bar and just kept it in the tools area. And the reason for that is because we, as in me and Kat, or Kat and I, were in a series of webinars last week that Brightspace was holding. And they suggested to take the quizzes tool out of the nav bar because then it lessens the likelihood that a student would click on the quizzes tool prematurely and like think that they have so many quizzes to complete, like if you've set them up ahead of time, or maybe they think they have to complete a certain quiz that isn't even due yet, things like that. So we put it back into the tools list instead of in the nav bar for easy access. So we're kind of just encouraging adding your quizzes to the content tool when you're ready to present them to your students.